And I've spent 2 weeks just in the first 14 verses of 1 Kings chapter 17. I tell you, I have learned so much through Elijah, and these are major things that God has used to direct my life, and I have seen great, great miracles happen. And that's not an exaggeration. I mean miracles, supernatural things take place because of what I learned right here. I'm saying all of this just to encourage you that what I've been saying here is life-changing, life-transforming. And I would encourage you, if you've missed any of this teaching, to please go to our website. You can look at the previous broadcasts that I've already have, or you can get these books. I've got books, CDs, DVDs, a study guide, and we have an entire package that we're calling our lessons package, where you get the lessons from David, lessons from Joseph, and lessons from Elijah all combined. So we've got a lot of great things in this package. I'd encourage you to please take advantage of it. The last couple of days I've been dealing with Elijah going to Zarephath, and the Lord said in 1 Kings chapter 17 verse 9 that I have commanded a widow there to sustain thee. This wasn't just any widow, but God had spoken to this woman and spoken to her that she would be sustaining someone, keeping them alive, meeting their needs. In the natural, it didn't look like she had even enough to meet her own needs. But I believe she had a word from God, and because of it, she was believing for something. I'm not sure that she understood exactly how it would happen, but God had spoken to her, and she was believing. And you can see this because in the next verse, instead of being at home just depressed and discouraged, saying, "What's the use, I give up," or instead of being in her prayer closet just begging God, she was out in public looking for sticks, going about her normal day, getting some sticks so that she could fix a fire and cook this last little bit of meal, last little bit of oil for her and for her son. She was acting like it was just a normal day. That takes faith. I couldn't tell you how many people come to me and they have just run up a white flag. They've quit. They've surrendered. And they may be praying, but they're just praying, that God somehow or another will intervene. But they aren't taking any steps of faith. They aren't doing anything normal. They figure, what's the use? They've just given up. This woman wasn't like that. There was a place called there for her. And for her, it was out doing what God had told her to do. She was planning on success. And so then Elijah comes to her and asks her for some water. She goes to fetch the water, and he says, "While you're at it, would you make me a little cake and bring me something to eat?" And this woman did say in verse 12 that she was just going to use her last little bit of food to make something for her and for her son, that they might eat it and die. And some people take that literally and think that she's just has no faith, she's expecting to die. But again, God had spoken to her. He said that in verse 9. In verse 10, she was out there doing something instead of sitting at home giving up or praying for something. And I believe that instead of her making a confession that she was going to die, she was just stating the natural fact to see, are you the one that God has spoken to me about? And then Elijah, in verse 13, said unto her, "Fear not, go and do as thou hast said, but make me thereof a little cake first, and bring it unto me, and after make for thee and for thy son." Did you know there is a prejudice, there is a resistance against ministers receiving offerings. And you know what? I understand it. I really do, because I have been in meetings where ministers have manipulated and coerced people, and some of this is well-deserved. Not all of it, but some of it is well-deserved. And so I understand that. But did you know Elijah said, "Make for me thereof first." You could take that as a total selfish thing that, I don't care about you and I don't care about your son. I don't care if you die. You take your last little bit of food and give it to me. Some people could read it that way, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people that you think this is exactly how ministers operate. But I'm telling you, Elijah wasn't taking from this woman. He was giving to her. She needed to take a step of faith, and she needed to give. I mentioned this on one of my programs a while back. I taught not too long ago on the power of partnership. And I went to a little church where one of our Bible college graduates lived up in the mountains of Colorado, and he wanted me to come to his church. And he only had like 20 or 30 members, and so he went together with 2 other churches. Altogether, there was 100 people in attendance, and they asked me to come, so I said I'd go. And when I got there, they said, "We want you to receive the offerings." They didn't tell me why, but to me, I thought it was because they figured I wouldn't get very much money. But if I'd received the offerings, I wouldn't have anybody to blame but myself. So they wanted me to receive the offerings. So the very first service, I got up and told them I just came from Charlotte, North Carolina. This has been quite a while ago, and I had just come from a church that gave me like $60,000 in the offering. And so I stood up and told the people, I said, I just came from this church. I just got an offering of $60,000. I'm not a poor preacher. I didn't barely get into town. And if you don't give, I won't be able to get out of the town. I said, I don't need your money. And when I said that, this pastor, he was sitting on the front, you could just see the blood, all of the color drain out of his face. It was like, you've killed the offering. Because again, most people think that the only reason to give is because this ministry needs your money. Now, I'm not saying that churches and ministries don't need money, but that is not the reason to give. And what I begin to do is to teach those people, it's not about what I need. You need to trust God. You need to take a step of faith. And I could spend weeks on this. I'm not going to do it today, but there is something supernatural that happens when a person takes a step of faith in the financial realm. I mean, it is miraculous. It is supernatural. Let me put it to you this way. I have never met a mature Christian, which you could debate what a mature Christian is, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but I have never met what I call a mature Christian that isn't a giver. I mean, not just an occasional giver when it's convenient, but they give off of everything they get. They give off the top, the first fruits. They don't just give if there's something left over and it's convenient. No, they are committed givers. I have never met a mature Christian who's not a committed giver. On the other hand, I have met many Christians who are nice people, and they may love God, and they may have had their life changed, but they're just kind of up and down like a yo-yo. They may be on fire for God now, but if I come back the next year, I'm not sure that they're going to be there. I've seen this over and over, and I mean, it is consistent that the people that are up and down like a yo-yo are not the committed, faithful givers. They may give occasionally, but they don't just have a revelation on this giving. And I believe that there's a correlation. People who are immature and struggle and are up and down and in and out, and you don't know for sure if they're going to continue to serve God next year, those people only give when it's convenient to give. People who give on a consistent basis, who have a revelation and they just trust God, and they don't trust God one time, they don't do it in spurts. You know, the Bible says that the just live by faith. They live there. This is how they conduct their life. People like that are mature, and they can weather storms, and they can go through hardship. And it doesn't matter what happens. If somebody they love dies, if they lose a job, if something happens, they're still going to be serving God, and they just have a commitment level. And I'm telling you, there is a direct relationship between the way you handle money and your spiritual maturity. I know some of you are saying that is not true. Let me share this passage with you over here in Luke chapter 16. I wished I had time to teach on the whole context of this, but here's what Jesus said. In Luke chapter 16, verse 10, He says, "He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much, and he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much." And you know what He's talking about? If you read it in context, every verse in front and every verse behind it is talking about money. He's saying that trusting God with your money is the least use of your faith. And I meet people all the time say, "Oh, I believe in God for a healing of cancer. I'm believing God for my family to be saved. I'm believing God to show me direction to make this business work," but they won't trust God in their finances. They feel like, well, I'm just not there yet. You know, that's for the super saint. That's for the super dupers. That's for the ones who want a doctorate degree in Christianity or whatever. But for us, entry-level Christians, I can't trust God like that. Jesus is saying trusting Him with your finances is the least. This isn't for the super saints. This is for the baby Christian. The baby Christian. And when you start trusting God, there is something supernatural that takes place. I'm telling you, I have seen this in my life. Right now, I'm in a position where I'm believing God for mega bucks. And you know what? I am giving like I have never given before. I give away hundreds of thousands of dollars every single month. And I am planting seed and I am doing things because there is a direct relationship between giving and receiving. Luke 6:38, give and it shall be given unto you. Everybody would like it to be given unto them, but they don't want to give. Over in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, I believe it's around verse 6, it says, he that soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly. He which soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully. And then verse 7 says, every man as he purposeth in his own heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, because God loves a cheerful giver. You know, that verse 6 says, if you sow a little, you reap a little. If you sow a lot, you reap a lot. And there's a lot of people, everybody I know wants to reap a lot, but they want to sow as little as they can and yet get as much as they can. You know, if a farmer had that attitude, he'd go broke. You're going to plant just a few seeds, but you want a huge harvest. No, it's just the opposite. A farmer looks at the harvest that he wants and he plants seed accordingly. Did you know that you can determine the harvest that you get by how much seed that you sow? And I know that there's some people that think, well, you can't do that. That's what a farmer does all of the time. You know, if you have X number of acres and you need this much harvest and stuff to pay your bills, that determines how much seed you plant. And they plant seed proportional to the harvest that they want. But in the spiritual realm, people all of the time are praying for this huge harvest, but they just are giving little pittance to God. Again, it's not the dollar amount. It's the proportion. It's the percentage. This is the reason that the Lord asked for 10%. He didn't ask for, $1,000 from everybody or $100,000. Not everybody's able to give a certain amount, but everybody can give a percentage. If all you got's a dime, you got a penny, that's a tithe. God looks at what you have left over after you give, not just what you give. Some people that may have millions and millions of dollars, they could give 1,000 or 10,000, and yet God looks at their percentage, and it was very small. You know, Jamie and I heard recently some of the political figures, what their giving amounted to, and I guarantee you, it's pitiful, pitiful with most of these people. They're willing to take your money and give it to somebody else, but they aren't willing to take their money and give to God. But I'm telling you, God looks at the percentage, and it opens up a door for it. It just changes things when you start giving. If you can't trust God with that which is least, I believe you're deceiving yourself to think that you're trusting God for healing, for deliverance, for joy, for peace, for marriage, for children, etc. And yet you can't do that which is least. If you can't jump 5 feet, you can't jump 10 feet. If you can't do that which is least, you can't do that which is greatest. So anyway, I say all of this because Elijah, he says, you give to me first. That could be taken as a total selfish thing, that he was putting himself ahead of her, but the truth was, he was putting her ahead of himself, and this was God's way to bless her, this widow woman. You know, I deal with this same thing, that I don't want anybody to think that I'm just after you and after your money and after the things that you can do for me. And I know that there's people that say, oh, no, that's not true. That's exactly the way you are. I can't control what you think, but I'm telling you, that is not my motivation at all. I've given away, I don't even know, we quit counting, but I've given away over 50 million CDs and DVDs and books and study guides and all kinds of things. I've given away millions and millions of stuff. Over 53% of all of the people who contact our ministry don't give us a penny. They ask for these materials. We say for a donation, and some people, we've had people send in a button before and say, that's all I've got, and we send it to them. We've had people send in a penny and we send it to them. But the majority, over 50%, don't give a thing. And you know what? We still supply. Not everything. There's some really expensive items that we have, but most of the stuff, we'll go ahead and give it to them anyway. If you're sitting there thinking that the only reason I'm encouraging people to give is because I'm after your money, you know, you're just wrong. I don't know how to prove to you you're wrong, but you're wrong. But I don't like to be perceived as I'm after your money. I don't like that. Man, I dislike that. And yet there's people that I guarantee you right now that you're just sitting here thinking this is the only reason I'm talking about it. I'm talking about it because these are some of the lessons that I've learned from Elijah. Elijah said, you give to me first. And some people just immediately would think this is a typical preacher just after their money. He's going to take that cake from in between her teeth and let her starve to death. No, Elijah wasn't taking from her. He did this because it was for her benefit. You remember that story I started to tell about me being there and saying I was receiving the offerings and said, I don't need your money. And I taught them why it was beneficial for them to give, how it was going to help them. When I left there, the pastor called me the next week. And he said, honestly, I don't remember anything you taught during that meeting except your offerings. He says, those things spoke to me. And the pastor personally had a revelation of prosperity and how you have to give and trust God and stuff. But he wouldn't say it because he was embarrassed. He was afraid people would take it wrong. And because of it, he hadn't been sharing the truth with these people. And it just changed his life when he understood that receiving an offering isn't about him and about his need. It's about the people you need to learn to give. We need to exhort people to give. This is God's way to bless you and to get His blessing to you. And so after the meeting was over, he got up the next Sunday and he got up in front of his people and he told them about how that those offering talks had touched his life. And he actually got on his knees and asked his church to forgive them. Forgive him. He says, I knew these things, but I haven't encouraged you. And you know what? They gave me a larger offering than they had ever given any guest speaker. I mean, by multiple times more. And he said that when he was on his knees and asking the people to forgive him, this is after, you know, those 3 churches had broken up and gone back to their local church, and there was only like 20 or 30 people there. And they came up and started hugging him and saying that they loved him and that they forgave him. And they started throwing money on the platform. And this little church of 20 or 30 people paid off over $20,000 worth of indebtedness that day as this guy humbled himself and just asked for forgiveness. And he says it had started a revival. It changed things. I'm telling you, I wasn't taking from these people, I was giving to them. As I taught them about how giving blesses them, it just set that church free. It paid off their indebtedness. They gave me a large offering, but it paid off their indebtedness. It cemented a relationship between them and their pastor. And who knows what other testimonies came out of that. I'm telling you, this is so important. Over in Mark chapter 10, Jesus was talking about the rich young ruler. He told that rich young ruler to give up everything that he had and come follow him. And the rich young ruler wouldn't do it because he had much possessions. And then the Lord began to say, how hard is it for those who trust in riches to enter into the kingdom of heaven? It's not that riches are the problem, it's the trust in riches. And if a person says, oh, well, I don't trust in my riches, well, then do you tithe? Do you give an offering above that? Well, I need that. I would if I had any extra. Well, then you trust in riches. You're supposed to give the first fruits to God. And when I say things like this isn't because I'm desiring your money. I'm desiring to get the truth to you and to see you get set free. You need to learn to start giving. And so Jesus said, as he was talking about all of this, Jesus answered and said, verily I say unto you, there is no man that hath left house or brethren or sisters or father or mother or wife or children or lands for my sake and the gospel's, but he shall receive 100-fold now in this time houses and brethren and sisters and mothers and children and lands with persecutions, and in the world to come eternal life. The Lord said we would receive 100-fold on anything we give to Him. Whether it's, houses, lands, anything. And it certainly applies to money. We will receive 100-fold in this life and in the world to come, everlasting life. And notice it says we will receive with persecutions. I used to think that this was just talking about persecution in general, persecution for being a godly person, being a moral person, or whatever. No, this is specifically talking about persecution over prosperity. Did you know if you get to really believing God and giving and God starts prospering you, you're going to have people persecute you. Unbelievers, yes, but primarily Christians. Christians will come out against you. Christians will ridicule you and say that, boy, you're in it just for the money and you're one of these prosperity preachers. Well, do you want to be a poverty preacher? Do you want to be a sickness preacher? Yes, I preach in prosperity. I believe that God wants to bless us. And there is persecution associated with prosperity. One of the statements out of a magazine that I read that just really changed my life, it says, God is looking for somebody who will bear persecution for being prosperous. God is looking for someone who will care more about what He thinks than what people thinks. And I wrote underneath there, I said, God, look no further. It's me. I need a lot of money in order to do all the things that God has called me to do. I've mentioned this before, but we're in the process of building an entire Bible college campus. I need about $180 million over the next 5 or 6 years. And there's a lot of money. But God, just like Elijah right here, he had already spoken to this widow. But the money didn't come directly to Elijah without him doing something. He had to go and speak to the widow and say, give to me first. And then he gave her a promise that your meal won't waste, your oil won't waste until the day that the Lord sends rain. Likewise, I'm trusting that God has already spoken to people. I believe that there are at least 100,000 people who would become grace partners with us. That's a person that gives $1 a day, $30 a month average. And I believe that there's 100,000 people out of the millions of people that watch this program who God has already spoken to. He's already talked to you. And for whatever reason, you haven't followed through. There's people that have watched this program for decades, and you've never given. I'm telling you, God is saying you need to give. We have a number on your screen, or you can call, you can write. Also, please get these materials. This book entitled Lessons from Elijah is a life changer. I really believe that. I have it in English and in Spanish. We have CDs, DVDs, a study guide, and then we have an entire package where we're teaching lessons from David, from Joseph, and Elijah. Our announcer will give you that information, and I encourage you to please call or write today and get the product, and also become a partner with us. Be one of 100,000.